A while ago, I decided to try a new experiment with my iPhone 13 Pro Max. I decided to buy an Apple leather case, an original Apple leather case, so I could use this as an e-reader, an eBook reader. The reason for buying a leather case for that is that I can hold it much better and I can have it outside without worrying too much and so on, and it is not so slippery, and you have the edges here to hold in and so on. Much easier to read on this phone when having a leather case. So now I have used it as an ebook reader for a while, and I must say that it's much better than I thought it should be. Many say that you need a dedicated e-reader like these two to read ebooks on, because the screen is much better. You don't have backlit display, you have a frontlit display instead, and that's much better for your eyes. Yes, that's true. And e-ink is awesome. It looks like paper, and you can have it outside in direct sunlight and much more. And some also says that you don't have any distractions on an e-reader. But I have made this iPhone 13 Pro Max as near a real e-reader as possible. So for example, when I will read a book, I first go into focus modes, and here you see reading. When I tap reading, now I have a reading focus mode. Now nothing can be a distraction, nothing can make me want to read a notification or anything, because I don't get any notifications I don't want. Because I have created that focus mode to only show notifications from some persons I want to have notifications from. No other persons. And no one can make a call to me more than those persons. And no apps can make notifications that I don't want to have notifications from. So that focus mode could be as good as the focusing you have when reading on a real ebook reader. And for example, when I'm reading books, I usually use Storytel. It's a service, a subscription service for books, both audiobooks and ebooks. And when I use that, I can sync that with my ebook reader from Storytel, the Storytel reader. The Storytel reader can only be used with a Storytel account. You can't sideload books and so on. You need to have a Storytel account for this e-reader to work. And when I read on my iPhone a book, you see here, you can see down here 1,815 pages in this book. The same book on the Storytel reader with about the same font size, as you can see, about the same font size. Then the Storytel reader needs, as you can see there, 2021 pages. As I said, 1,815 on my iPhone 13 Pro Max in the Storytel reader on my phone, and 2021 pages on the Storytel reader. So on my iPhone 13 Pro Max, you have more content on the display than you have on the dedicated Storytel reader. And as you can see, if I turn this off and also the iPhone off, you see that the display on the iPhone 13 Pro Max goes from top to bottom. So you see that the content is from top to bottom. And on the Storytel Reader it's a bit wider, but not so much. As you can see, not so much. So basically the display on the iPhone 13 Pro Max is larger than on the Storytel Reader. The Storytel Reader is a 6-inch display and iPhone 13 Pro Max is a 7.7 inch. Yes, so it's bigger with the numbers there, but as you can see, the Storytel Reader has a wider aspect ratio. But that doesn't help, because you have a larger display on this and you can get more content on the display. So having the dedicated Storytel Reader to reading books is not much bigger display than having the iPhone 13 Pro Max. The iPhone 13 Pro Max has more content on the display at the same time, as you can see. And one huge plus on the Storytel Reader is that you can see at the bottom here, here you can see how many pages are left on the chapter you are reading. And in the Storytel Reader on iPhone 13 Pro Max, you can't. You can only see how many pages you have read and how many pages the book is. So that's a differentiation you can think of when reading books on iPhone 13 Pro Max. And I also have a Kobo Libra H2o here. And let's wake this up. Like so. Here is the same book on the Kobo Libra H2o running co-reader software. I love that software. I have videos on my channel how to install co-reader. But here you can see I have only 1033 pages when reading on the Kobo Libra H2o. Same book as on the other two. So that is because the Kobo Libra H2o has a 7-inch display with a wider aspect ratio. That is the reason why you have more content on the display. And as you can see, because it has a 7-inch display, it's about the same size as the iPhone 13 Pro Max when it comes to the size, like vertically. But horizontally you can see that you have more content on the Kobo Libra H2o. There you see more content on the sides, so that means that you can have more content on the Kobo Libra H2o, more content than you have on the iPhone 13 Pro Max. But that is because this is bigger. And now we came to another huge plus for the iPhone 13 Pro Max. Having a dedicated eReader means that you have more than one device with you wherever you go. If you want to read, when you have the time to read and when you can read a book. If you have an iPhone 13 Pro Max as your eBook reader, then you can read everywhere you are, whenever you want. You have always the book you're reading with you wherever you go. That's a huge plus for me. The best e-reader is the one you can have always with you. And you can that with the iPhone 13 Pro Max. You can have it always with you wherever you go. It's a huge plus for the iPhone 13 Pro Max in my eyes. So, and you know I have done a lot of videos about PWM flickering on OLED displays and mini LED displays. And yes, they have PWM flickering, and eBook readers doesn't have that. That's a huge plus for an eBook reader. But iPhone has a technology that Apple has invented that is ProMotion. And ProMotion goes from 120 Hz down to 10 Hz, depending on what you're doing on the display and what you're showing on your display, and if it moves and if it's a still image, for example. So 10 Hz, you can say that is 10 frames per second, and 120 Hz is 120 frames per second. This is not exactly how it works, but we can say that it is like that. And when reading books, ProMotion goes down automatically to 10 Hz, 10 frames per second when reading books, and have 120 Hz when scrolling and do web surfing and watching videos and so on, when you need to have 120 Hz. Then the iPhone has that. This display has 120 Hz when it needs to, and it goes down exactly how much Hertz you need while doing different stuff. So when you're reading on a page like this, then you only have 10 frames per second, 10 Hz. And that means that my eyes doesn't hurt while reading on this. I don't get headaches and migraines and so on that I had on my earlier phones, and Samsung phones, Android phones and so on, because this ProMotion goes through up to 120 Hz and 10 Hz. That means that my eyes is not tiresome, they don't get tired, and I don't get headaches and so on, because it uses only 10 Hz when reading. And another thing that Apple has done with the iPhone 13 Pro Max is that it's much brighter. The display is much brighter on the iPhone 13 Pro Max. So basically you can read outside now. Very good in direct sunlight. Yes, you have some glares and so on, and it could be quite hard to read sometimes because the display is not anti-glare as an eBook reader display. An eBook reader is much better for direct sunlight. In fact, an eBook reader gets better and better the more light you have. But because of Apple has done the display so bright on the iPhone 13 Pro Max, you can basically read outside in direct sunlight. So it works good. For me, I usually is in the shadow when it's hot in the summer when I'm reading outside. So the display is awesome on the iPhone 13 Pro Max while reading. One huge drawback for the iPhone 13 Pro Max though is the battery life, of course. An ebook reader, a dedicated ebook reader, can have battery life for over a week or even 2 weeks. But on iPhone 13 Pro Max you have to charge every day. And if you're doing ebook reading on it, and if you are outside, for example, then you can't read for more about 5 or 6 hours at the most. Then the battery life is empty if you read in direct sunlight, for example. And the iPhone 13 Pro Max gets quite hot while reading in the direct sunlight because it needs to have the display as bright as possible. So that is also a huge drawback. So the battery life on an iPhone 13 Pro Max is really good, but not for ebook reading if you compare them to dedicated ebook readers. So that is a one huge plus for dedicated ebook reader, the battery life. But if you want to have better battery life, you can also do a focus mode and do other settings, shortcuts and so on an iPhone 13 Pro Max that turns off Wi-Fi and mobile data so that the battery life gets better while reading. So that's a possibility. You don't have to have Wi-Fi on and mobile data on while reading. For example, when using Storytel, you need to have Wi-Fi on because you need to always sync where you are in the book through Wi-Fi, so the Storytel reader can have the same page as I have on my iPhone 13 Pro Max. But if you don't use that, if you only use, for example, Apple Books, here you have the same book on Apple Books, then you don't have to have Wi-Fi or mobile data on while reading. But when you stop reading, you need to sometime sync where you are in the book and your bookmarks and all that. So, but while reading, you don't need to have cellular data or Wi-Fi on. Then the battery life gets much better. One huge plus on reading on iPhones is also, we can go back to Storytel here, is also that you can have dark mode much easier than you have on a dedicated ebook reader. I know Kindle has dark mode, and also actually I can have dark mode when using co-reader. Oh, excuse me, sorry. Like so. So now I have dark mode on my Kobo Libra H2o. Because I use co-reader, I can choose that. But otherwise, I think it's a huge plus to having dark mode on an iPhone 13 Pro Max. And you can also choose sepia color, like this, if you want. And you can, of course, have paper white color like this. I think that's excellent. And I must say that I think now you don't see that as good maybe on this video though, but I think the display on the iPhone 13 Pro Max is more paper white than it is on my dedicated ebook readers. As you can see here, they look more grayish, the backgrounds, a lot more grayish in the background, as you can see, and you have a more paper white color on the iPhone 13 Pro Max. That's quite hard to see maybe on this video, but it really is much whiter. Another huge plus for iPhone 13 Pro Max, as I said, it's much brighter, the display. But when I'm reading at night, I can say that this can go down to minimum brightness, and I can still read this book in total darkness. In total darkness, I can still read this very good. In fact, the display is quite bright still, at least the text. Even if I have the minimum darkness, the minimum brightness, I mean, on the phone. So that means when I'm reading inside in total darkness, then the battery life gets awesomely good on an iPhone. I can read a lot longer if I use dark mode and in reading in total darkness, because the display brightness gets much lower. And I have set up the display settings on my phone so that it's totally automatically, as you can see, light until sunset. I have set this up here, sunset to sunrise. So it automatically changed the display to black when it's dark outside. And I also have true tone and brightness totally automatically, as you can see. And I also have night shift. So the display gets warm when it's dark outside. The the more it's dark, the more warmer it gets. And I have set up a scheduled time for that because sundown and sunset in Sweden could be very little sunlight in the day in the winter time. So I have set it up from 8 to 10 minutes over 7 in the morning. So I have that as night shift. Then the display is very warm during that time. You can of course set that to sunset to sunrise if you want, but as I said, here in Sweden I think that's not as good as having a dedicated time for it. So when I'm reading ebooks on my iPhone, I usually use Storytel because I pay for Storytel. That is what I use the most. But sometimes I also use Apple Books because I like Apple Books, how it looks, and I like the fonts in Apple Books. I really like that. Another huge plus for Apple Books on an iPhone is text-to-speech with neural engine voices that sounds like real humans. And you can do that in Apple Books. Quite good. I really love that because then you can read books faster when you want to and read normally when you want to. Works great. And I also like that you can do some notifications and annotations and all that. Like doing this, for example, and a highlight. I love that I can do a lot of this different stuff. I can of course do that in Kobo Reader on my H2o Libra H2o. But Apple Books syncs with my iPad and my Mac, so I have notes, annotations synced between my devices. That's great. The Storytel reader though is really bad when it comes to notes and annotations, because I can't do that on the Storytel reader. It's really bad. The same thing with the mobile app actually. If I want to do an annotation here, I can't. The only thing I can do is look up or share that text snippet. But I usually use Storytel Reader when reading because it syncs with my Storytel Reader the times I use it, and the only time I actually use the Storytel Reader now is when I'm outside in direct sunlight, and if I'm going to the beach or anything, because I need a longer battery life and actually the e-ink display when reading in direct sunlight. The only time I use it. Otherwise I always use my iPhone 13 Pro Max for reading books at the moment, but that is because I'm doing this experiment. We will see when the experiment ends if I will still keep using my iPhone 13 Pro Max as my main ebook reader. Probably because I love that I have always with me. It's everywhere, even in the toilet I have it with me. So I think that's awesome. When I have an ebook reader, I usually don't have it with me every time I'm going anywhere and so on. With this I can read a book in when I'm standing in a queue, standing in line, waiting for something, and so on. I can read whenever I want when having this iPhone 13 Pro Max as my dedicated ebook reader. And I think that's awesome. Okay, I think that's it for this video. It's quite long, but I needed to talk about this, and I think I do videos like this nowadays. I'm more uncut videos, if you know what I mean. So I want to talk more than sitting video editing. So I do more uncut videos, even if English is not my native language, and I do a lot of wrong sayings when talking. I love doing these kinds of videos where I talk more than doing video editing in a video editor and cutting everything up and take away all the empty space and all that. So I have stopped doing that. I'm doing longer videos now. That is what I want to do when I'm doing videos. So, please like this video and please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Okay, bye.